Welcome to my channel. It was a Friday, and I had left the hangar earlier than normal. The guys had their own things to take care of, and they'd likely head home afterward since I wasn't around. I was looking forward to spending the evening with my wonderful wife Zoe. We had been together for nearly 6 years and married for 3.5. Both of us were 29 years old. Lately our relationship had felt a little slow, and over the past month or so, she seemed somewhat distracted. I wanted to make tonight memorable and took steps to do so. Good wine, a couple of ribeye steaks from the butcher, and roses from a florist rather than a supermarket. I planned to light some candles and hopefully get to the bottom of what had been troubling her. My goal was to show her how much I loved her and, with luck, have an early night. I got home well before she did. I tidied up the house, put fresh sheets on the bed, and set up candles in the bedroom. In the kitchen I laid the table with our finest silverware and napkins. I opened a bottle of wine so it could breathe and placed the roses near the front door where she'd noticed them the moment she walked in. Zoe loves the smell of roses. I prepped my signature scalloped potatoes, thinly sliced and lightly drizzled with olive oil, seasoned with salt, pepper, and a touch of rosemary. I also added a bit of mustard powder to the steaks for just the right amount of flavor. Everything was ready for her arrival, and I was proud of how it all had turned out. All that remained was to wait for my wife, hoping to sweep her off her feet and make sure the magic lasted through the weekend. I was arranging the potatoes on the baking tray as the oven preheated when I heard the front door open. Just then Zoe called out, "Richard, are you home?" That puzzled me since my car was parked in front, and the roses by the door should have made it obvious I was inside. I was just finishing up with the rosemary when I overheard her say, "All right, we got here first, we can sit on the couch, and when he walks in, it'll be better if we're seated so he's standing. That way he won't be too shocked when we tell him." "Tell me what?" I asked as I stepped into the living room. There stood Zoe, looking surprised, along with another man. The moment I saw him, I knew who he was. Zoe had mentioned him a few times over the past couple of months. He was the new deputy head of HR. He was just over 6 feet tall, fit, blonde, handsome, and carried himself with a bit of arrogance. I must have looked confused because he wasn't taking things too seriously. He extended his hand and said, "Hey Dick, I'm Gerald." Still in a daze, I shook his hand. It was a firm, almost crushing grip. What a jerk. Zoe broke the silence. "Richard, we need to talk. Was Gerald staying for dinner? I could always thaw another steak if he was." But then she continued, "I'm spending the weekend with Gerald." "Just for the weekend?" I didn't expect that. Gerald stepped forward, smiling confidently. "This will be good for you. I'm going to show her things you can only imagine. You'll appreciate her more after this. It's just one weekend, and she won't ever do anything like this again." He paused, then added, "Never." I began snapping out of my shock. "If she does, I'll divorce her." Gerald walked up to me, staring down at me in a menacing way. "No, you won't," he said darkly. "You can't stop me." In the same ominous tone he added, "No, I can't stop you, but I swear the day you file for divorce, you'll have trouble walking away from it. From that day on, your life will be filled with pain." "It's your choice." He moved closer to Zoe, smiled at me, and switched to a casual voice. "She's going to spend the weekend with me. Afterward, she'll be yours and won't ever cheat again. Right, sweetheart?" The way he called her sweetheart made me furious. I was stunned, unsure of what to do. "Have you two already slept together?" I accused, assuming the worst from his attitude. "No, we haven't," Zoe responded, sounding indignant. "That would be cheating." "And this isn't," I muttered, reaching for a drink. "I'll get you a beer," Zoe offered. I growled. "I can do that myself." Gerald placed a hand on her shoulder. "Give him a minute, sweetheart. He needs time to process this. We've been planning for weeks, and we just dropped it on him in minutes. He'll come around. They always do." His words made it clear he had done this before. I stormed into the kitchen, feeling Zoe wanted to follow me, but Gerald held her back. It was probably for the best. His constant use of sweetheart drove me mad. I poured myself a glass of wine, but quickly realized that wasn't the drink for this moment. I rushed to the garage where I kept my beer fridge, yanked the door open, and grabbed a bottle of Old Speckled Hen. I slammed the door shut, furious at the situation. Searching for a bottle opener, I realized it was in the kitchen. Damn it, I didn't want to go back inside until I'd cleared my head. Using an old army trick, I popped the cap off on the corner of my workbench, just like I had in the past. As I calmed down and thought things through, A plan started to form. I walked to the far end of the garage, opened a cabinet, and took something, tucking it into the back of my pants. After finishing the beer, I grabbed another and opened it with a proper bottle opener this time. I also prepared something else. I slid the largest knife from the block into the back of my pants, right beside the other item. It was just for show. I had no desire to end up behind bars. I was confident in my plan, and that was all that mattered. Taking a deep breath, I returned to the living room. Those two cheating fools were sitting on my couch, holding hands. As soon as they saw me, they quickly let go and moved apart slightly. Good. I had gained a bit of the upper hand. It seemed they were waiting for me. I pulled out my phone and tossed it onto the coffee table. It was clear I was recording. Gerald noticed my anger, stood up, and spread his arms. I replied, "I'm recording this for my own protection, and oddly enough, for yours and hers too." He then warned me, "Don't even think about sending it to work. I'm the deputy head of HR. All complaints pass through me, and I've got friends who will alert me if anyone tries to bypass the system. It's not what you know, but who you know. Understand?" "I understand," I answered seriously, locking eyes with him. "I have a suggestion for how we can settle this," he smirked, arrogant as ever. Pointing at the phone, I added, "For the record, tell me what you intend to do with my wife." Puffing up with self-importance, he said, "I'm taking your wife for the weekend. I'm going to give her experiences she's never had before, teaching her things that'll make your time together better. She'll come back to you more capable of giving you the pleasure you've been missing. Though you probably won't enjoy that until next weekend. She'll be too sore to walk properly." He chuckled at his own words. I didn't believe a word of his ridiculous claims. "And what happens after that?" I asked. "She comes home to you, having had the best weekend of her life, but she's promised me she'll be faithful to you from now on. She'll bring back new skills that'll drive you wild." I turned to Zoe. "Zoe, is this really what you want?" I asked. "Yes, Richard, please. It's just one weekend. Afterward, I swear I'll stay loyal to you." Facing Gerald, I asked, "And what if she breaks her promises, just like she did on our wedding day? What if she cheats again? Will you come back to punish her physically like you've threatened me? Or what if some other guy, better than you, offers her something more?" My voice was dripping with sarcasm, but it seemed lost on him. He looked confused, as if no one had ever asked him that before. "She promised me she'll stay faithful after this weekend," he repeated. "Yeah, like I believe everything she's saying now. Then I made my move. Here's the deal, I'll fight you for her." Gerald was taller, broader, and slightly younger, but he just smiled, still full of arrogance. "If that's what you want, we can do it," he said. "I don't want to waste any time, so let's settle this right here, right now." "I'm in," I replied. Zoe pressed her palms to her face in that nervous way she does, excitement flashing in her eyes. "Two men fighting over me," she whispered. But I growled, "I'm not fighting for you. You're not worth it. I'm fighting for my self-respect." The light in her eyes faded, and her expression became serious. Turning to Gerald, I said, "If I win, you leave and never talk to her again, not even at work. If you win, you get your weekend with her, and I won't file for divorce. But there are rules." Still smug, Gerald responded, "All right, let's hear them. The first man to fall on his back loses. No knives, no weapons, everything else goes. And whoever wins, no calling the police." "Fine, no cops," Gerald replied, still grinning. "Do you have any knives?" I pulled out a 30-centimeter butcher's knife from the waistband of my pants and placed it on the coffee table. His eyes widened, and he asked, "And I suppose you've got a gun, too?" With a smile, I reached behind my back and revealed an air pistol, an exact replica of a combat firearm. It looked real, and his confidence wavered slightly. But his arrogance remained. "I'm going to beat you to a pulp before I put you on your back." "Do your worst, idiot," I shot back. "Just remember the rules: no knives, no weapons, no cops. Everything else is fair game." "I'm not stupid," he sneered. "I get it. You little punk, you'll regret this. I might even keep her for the whole week." "If you win, maybe. But at least I'll have the self-respect of knowing I fought for my marriage. I won't have to live with shame every time I look in the mirror." Suddenly, Zoe spoke up. "No, please stop. I've changed my mind, Richard. Don't do this. Gerald, leave now. I don't want this anymore. She had realized I was getting the upper hand. But it was too late. Too late, sweetheart, I growled. You started this with him weeks ago, and I'm finishing it now, one way or another. Grab your phone and record it. I need proof. Zoe was crying. Things had spiraled out of her control. I gestured toward the kitchen door. After you, I said to Gerald. He walked through the kitchen and headed toward the back door. I grabbed a few items I'd prepared and followed him outside. The moment he stepped out, I kicked him hard in the back, sending him face first into the flower bed. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes burning with fury. I smiled and said, "No rules." Not entirely true, but it didn't matter. The point was made. He was furious, which is exactly what I wanted. Though he hadn't fallen on his back, I didn't expect him to. He swung at me, but it was so slow I could have seen it coming a mile away. I easily blocked it and threw the contents of my hand, salt, pepper, rosemary and mustard powder, straight into his face. He screamed, clutching his eyes as I tried to shove him onto his back, but he managed to step backward. He lowered his hand, tears streaming down his face, with snot dripping from his nose. I walked up to him and punched him in the stomach with all my strength. He bent over but didn't fall. Now he was clutching his stomach with one hand and his face with the other. I kneed him in the groin with full force, and he collapsed onto his knees, retching. He didn't have enough hands to cover all the pain. I tried pushing him onto his back, but he resisted, so I punched him hard in the face. He swayed on his knees but still didn't go down. My right fist hit his nose, and blood sprayed everywhere. Damn, that must have hurt. You never see this kind of pain on TV. I slapped him across the face with my open hand, causing his head to snap back. Then I hit him with the back of my hand, a stupid move as it hurt like hell. Leaning close, I quietly said, "You can end this." "Just lie on your back." I raised my hand again, and his knees buckled, sending him collapsing onto his side before rolling onto his back. Now the power balance was completely in my favor. I glanced over at Zoe, who had tears streaming down her cheeks, though I couldn't figure out why she was crying. Grabbing Gerald by the hair, I yanked him to his feet, not bothering to be gentle. Opening the garden gate, I said, "Remember this, you will never speak to her again, coward. And if the cops come after me, this beating will seem like nothing." I shoved him through the gate and shut it behind him. The stench of his humiliation lingered. He had clearly soiled himself. Zoe was still there, recording everything. As I passed her and walked into the kitchen to wash my hands, I said, "Send me a copy of that video. At least Gerald would smell of rosemary from what I had thrown on him earlier." Heading upstairs, Zoe followed me. I grabbed a suitcase from the spare bedroom and began packing her underwear into it. "What are you doing?" "I'm still yours," she said, watching as I continued packing. "We agreed I wouldn't divorce you if I lost. But I won, which means I'm divorcing you. I suggest you go stay with your parents." I carried the suitcase downstairs, opened the front door, and threw it outside. Then I picked up my phone and dialed her mother's number. "Hello, Richard, this is a nice surprise. What can I do for you?" Mary answered. "Would you kindly come pick up your daughter?" "I'm divorcing her." I hung up after that. Then I sent her the audio clip of Gerald boasting about his weekend plans with Zoe, which she had clearly wanted. I switched off my phone, took Zoe by the hand, and led her outside. After locking the door behind her, I ignored her knocking until it eventually stopped. I expected the police to show up, but they never did. Maybe Gerald was too embarrassed to admit someone smaller had beaten him. Either way, it didn't matter. I spent Saturday sorting through Zoe's belongings and doing some financial calculations. When my grandparents passed, the house was left to my sister and me. I had taken out a small mortgage to buy out her half, and I figured I'd need to reimburse Zoe for her contributions toward the mortgage. I edited the video and audio files and sent them to every email I could find at Zoe's workplace. People like Gerald surely made enemies, and I was sure they'd ensure the recordings reached the head of HR. On Sunday morning, Zoe's father arrived to collect the rest of her things. He looked at me and asked, "Is there any way that you could?" But my expression must have given him the answer. We shook hands, and he left. I suspect Zoe's parents were part of the reason the divorce went smoothly. It's been just over 4 months since I filed for divorce. One Saturday afternoon, I was in the garage cleaning my air guns for a shooting competition when the doorbell rang. I was about to get up when I heard someone say, "It's okay, I'll get it." It was Clara, the woman who keeps my house in order. She appeared at the garage door and said, "There's a lady at the door who says she's your wife, about 170 cm tall, blonde, around 30, maybe a bit older." I've put the kettle on and left her in the living room. I walked to the living room and saw Zoe. She looked nice, like she had made an effort, but she appeared about 5 years older. She didn't look well. It was the first time I'd seen her since kicking her out. "What do you want?" "I've been paying you the agreed share for the house," I said. "Richard, I'm so sorry. I made a horrible mistake. He convinced me it would be fine, promised everything would be okay. He told me that if you really loved me, you'd let me go through with it. He sounded so sure, even had one of the girls tell me how it worked for her." "Is that other girl still married?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "I don't know. I don't work there anymore." After everyone got the recordings, I was so ashamed. Nobody wanted to talk to me, and I had to leave. She hesitated. "I have to ask, are you still seeing Gerald?" "No, I never planned to. He kept his word and hasn't spoken to me since, but he didn't last long at work. After missing a few days, they kicked him out. Rumor has it another husband beat him up. It wasn't me. When I dragged him to the gate, I warned him. The police never came. But I stayed away from dark places." "Serves him right. Decent men don't sleep with someone else's wife." Zoe pleaded, "Please, Richard, can we start over? I'll never do anything so stupid again. I love you. I thought it was for your own good, but I made a mistake." At that moment, Clara entered, carrying a tray with cups, saucers, a teapot, a milk jug, and biscuits. She set it on the coffee table and said, "You might want to let it steep for a while," then disappeared into the kitchen. Zoe watched her leave. "Or have you already replaced me?" "That's Clara. She cleans once a week. I work so much that I don't have time for it. Plus, I had to take out an extra mortgage just to pay you." Zoe pleaded again, "So is there any chance?" "Please, Richard." I poured myself some tea and took a sip. I had acted too hastily, and Clara was right. I should have waited. It's been nearly 4 months, and I haven't heard anything from you. You didn't contest the divorce, so why show up now? She looked down at her knees, clearly ashamed. "I know I made a huge mistake. I wanted to give you space, hoping you'd miss me, and I needed time to gather the courage. My mum said if you still loved me, you might give me another chance. But my dad thinks I'm wasting my time. Still, I had to try, Richard, please." I took another sip of tea. Clara entered with a tray of cleaning supplies and headed upstairs. "I'm just going to tidy up upstairs. Nothing in your bedroom I shouldn't see, right?" she said with a soft chuckle. "Hope you put away all your bondage gear," she added with a grin before disappearing up the stairs. I turned to Zoe and said, "That's just her little joke. We never got into that sort of thing. Maybe we should have, but you were never interested in exploring anything different except with that fool. Even doggy style was too much for you." Zoe stared at me, but I didn't respond to her question. I was still mad, but I kept my emotions in check. "What do you expect me to say?" I asked. "You blindsided me with the news that you wanted to spend the weekend with another man. You planned it for weeks but only gave me 2 minutes to decide, threatening me with violence if I refused. You were excited by the idea of 2 men fighting over you, hoping your lover would win so you could have your wild weekend and then come back, thinking everything would go back to how it was. But for me, that would have been the new reality, and I would have never measured up to him in your eyes." "Yes, I was excited when I saw the 2 of you about to fight for me," Zoe admitted. "But when I saw you pull out a knife and your air gun, that's when I realized I had made a terrible mistake. I knew Gerald would never win, and I didn't want you to end up in jail because of the situation I put you in. I'm so sorry." "I loved you with all my heart, Zoe," I said. "But you killed that love when you told me you wanted to spend the weekend with him. For weeks you were distant and quiet. I thought something was wrong, so I tried to make you happy. Now I know you were planning to sleep with that jerk. I had planned a special dinner for us, complete with flowers. But instead of coming to me, you listened to that scumbag. You didn't talk to me, you made it a done deal by threatening me. How could you do that to someone you claimed to love? I'll never be able to trust you again. In fact, it hurts just being around you." She didn't touch her tea. "I think it's time for you to leave," I told her. Zoe stood up and walked toward the front door. I opened it for her and she looked back at me saying, "I love you. I'm really sorry, but I understand." I added one final remark before she left. Remember that girl who told you about Gerald? Karen Prescott? She's about to become Karen Jones again. Her husband's making her take back her maiden name. Zoe walked away in tears, and I didn't bother watching where she went. Curious about Clara, I went upstairs and found my bedroom door open. Stepping in, I unbuttoned my shirt and tossed it on the floor. Clara would probably scold me for that later, but I didn't care. As I entered the room, I saw Clara lying on my bed, the blanket pulled back, wearing black stockings and a playful smile. I couldn't find your bondage gear, she teased. That's because I don't own any, I replied. Too bad, she said with a grin. I would have liked to try it. By this point, I was down to my underwear. I went to the bathroom, grabbed the belt from my robe, and returned to the bedroom. This should do, I said, holding up the belt. Clara jumped up, turned around, and placed her hands behind her back. I quickly tied them and laid her down on the bed, slipping my head between her stocking-clad thighs. Almost an hour later, Clara was resting her head on my shoulder, one leg still draped over mine, her black stocking brushing my skin. Looking up at me, she said, I really should thank Zoe, but I just can't. It would feel wrong to be grateful for the pain she caused you. It'd be like thanking her for hurting you. She smiled. Once your divorce is final and I move in for good, we'll have to try that tying up again, she added. This was the first time I'd heard about her moving in permanently, but I didn't mind. As we began drifting off to sleep, I heard Clara whisper, I want to learn everything Zoe didn't. We fell asleep peacefully. Thank you for sticking around until the end. See you in the next episode of Cheating Stories. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.